corporate travel industry is worth somewhere between 7 to 7.5 billion in turnover in Australia and New Zealand. That's quite a significant amount.
AI, artificial intelligence, how's that affecting your business and how's that helping us to do these things in an easier way if it is in fact doing so?
So what will happen is that as a traveller, I want the system to start to understand me.
If I just bought a property in Rockhampton and I'm a lovely, hard-working, friendly person, but I've got a lot of new things, technology's never really been my skill set. That's why I'm in a people business. How do you recommend they go about that?
But following...
Welcome to Checked In with Resort Brokers. I'm Frank.
And I'm Trudy. Join us as we explore the intricate world of the wider Australian accommodation industry.
We're going to walk you through the ever-evolving landscape of hotels, motels, caravan parks, management rights and the communities, but most importantly, the stories that underpin them all.
From market trends and expert predictions to the incredible personal stories and lessons learned, we're going to cover it all.
Join us as we navigate this amazing industry together. Well, here we are, Trudy. Welcome back to Resort Brokers Radio, the artist formerly known as Checked In with Resort Brokers. I'm here with my fabulous co-host, Trudy Cooks, Managing Director of Resort Brokers. Trudy, new set, new branding. We're stepping it up.
We certainly are. Well, surprisingly or not, Frank, we've been having really good feedback, haven't we?
Well,
when I say
absolutely.
good feedback, good people liking the podcast,
People watching it.
People watching it, and
Yes.
also giving us some really constructive feedback about who they want to see, what they find interesting, because that's the idea of them. But no, finally now we've taken it out of the office, so you can't hear the agents doing deals in the background.
Yes, the noise. We'll insert that later.
We'll insert
That'll be
that
B-roll.
later, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And, well, give the people what they want. But no, we appreciate everyone tuning in.
Excellent.
And now we want to make it even more enjoyable to look at visually.
In that same spirit,
Yes.
I wanted to introduce, I'm very proud because we've stepped it up, that our first guest in the new branding of RB Radio, Resort Brokers Radio, that our new guest is one of my oldest and very best friends, right? You might be surprised. I know some sharp people despite this ridiculous beard.
Do you know what?
Right?
I always think there's one really, really talented, successful person in every friendship group, and yours is with us today.
I had to search hard, to be honest. But in that same spirit, I'd like to introduce my very best friend, Craig Southee. Craig Southee is the Regional General Manager for CT Connections. Craig and I have known each other since university, but we've always been quite synergistic in our careers. We've had some parallels in it. So, Craig, welcome to RB Radio. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Frankie. And even back in university, you use these big words like synergistic. I actually don't really know what synergistic means.
I
think it means that together we are parallel. But look, thanks very much for having me. What a cool set.
I know, great, right?
Loving the set. And I think 30 years I've known you, Frankie, and now you're still making me look good after all of this time.
Oh, you're
So
very
Thanks
nice
much for
words.
having me.
I could agree with you, but then we'd both be wrong. So, look, the reason why, some of our best ideas have come at the bottom of a bottle of red that probably was worth more than our first paychecks when we first got out of university.
Fair.
Right, yep. And so we were
Some
talking...
of our worst ideas too.
Yeah, that's right. But, we'll cut those out for today, for the purposes of today. But we were talking about exactly that, the fact that we've had careers that have existed in the tourism and travel industry alongside each other. You've been up here in southeast Queensland sort of flying the flag in the corporate travel industry for the better part of 20 years, not to give away your age, right? But tell us a little bit about your experience and tell us about what corporate travel is and the opportunity that is in southeast Queensland, but also all around Australia.
Look, I've had about 25 years in the industry, and it's been a remarkable industry to be part of. I think if I'm focused on this particular next half an hour, I've been very lucky and successful in managing really large-scale accommodation programs from procurement, design through to implementation, and that's for state governments, that's for global and national organisations. But a lot of my career has been in local, in regional centres, particularly here in Queensland. Probably the best gig that I've done is managing the procurement for the Cricket World Cup. That was fun.
Well, that's going to be an interesting part as we lead into the Olympics,
correct.
right? It's an important part of how this came together.
Yeah. So look, I think the industry, let's talk about the industry first, because you've got your leisure industry that sits over here, which is significant, and particularly to a lot of organisations and hotels and motels, etc. That's a large part of their supply base or customer base would be. But the corporate travel industry is worth somewhere between 7 to 7.5 billion in turnover in Australia and New Zealand, and that's quite a significant amount. If we pull that down to accommodation only, so if you look at that $7.5 billion, you've got a customer will usually have about 60% in air, about 30%.
So air, you mean the flights?
In the flights,
Yep.
and if you look at their entire program, 60% air, about 30% accommodation, and the rest then becomes incidental. So you're looking at probably about a $2.5 billion industry in Australia and New Zealand, and it's not all capital cities. And in fact, a large of it, if you go back to COVID, WA and Queensland particularly were the key states which were driving the accommodation industry, but driving the economy in general. A lot of suppliers and a lot of providers really didn't stop much in terms of downsides in their in their occupancy rates, etc. as well, particularly in those regional communities.
When the economy is shifting, there's still opportunity because business needs to move on. We just need to keep on getting on.
Correct. And if you look at what our economy exists of, that logistics and the mining services and all that kind of stuff, that still drives a lot of their regional centres. If you look at the essential services, your government travels and all that kind of stuff, that drives essential services.
Yes.
So even particularly in regional centres and even capital city centres, but regional centres, that accommodation, there's always going to be that real strong need, irrelevant of what's happening in the economy for corporate travel to be happening in those locations.
So we cover the entire country, CBDs and regional, and post-COVID, all our operators and clients, past and present, have enjoyed a halcyon period, right? And you've seen that too, because you very much come from the side of booking on behalf of who you call your partners.
Yeah.
So effectively working with big companies, organisations, and helping them with all their travel needs. And have you seen, the corporate dollar's always underpinned Australian accommodation, right? Which I'm amazed, though, you're saying $2.5 billion of the market
as the opportunities,
of it. And you say that those two places have changed. Have you seen a huge change in the way people book and the drivers? Like with the domestic tourism boom in a lot of key locations that were traditionally corporate.
Yeah.
Have you seen big move and pressure put on that?
Let's unpack that, because the way that people book is largely a corporate customer wants their people to stay inside of a online booking funnel. So within their environment, they will want them to go onto the travel agent's online site.
Yes.
And then they will want them from a duty of care perspective, from an efficiency perspective, from a compliance perspective.
Yes.
They will want those bookings to be facilitated through that tool. So an organisation probably has between 70 and 90% of their bookings actually facilitated online without any travel agent touch whatsoever, right?
Okay.
So that's very important then for your preferred suppliers to have their position in terms of being preference to the top of the list, in terms of a hotel being the favourite hotel that sits in that area. And that's largely driven by the customer, not necessarily the travel company that sits behind it. So it's really quite interesting once you start to
that's massive.
have a look and
how the technology supports the customer need rather than technology for technology's sake. But that doesn't take away the personal touch that a corporate travel agency can have, not just for the customer, but for the operators, because that's kind of where we thought that this conversation was really relevant, is because we help people buy and sell accommodation-based businesses. Yep. You help facilitate the wider travel trade all over the country.
Underpins those
right?
businesses.
And so we are using your favourite word, synergistic. Thank you, Trudy, for reminding me the word that I don't understand. All of these things are moving in the right direction. So talk to us about how people can benefit and maximise what they do in this space.
Yeah, so if you're an accommodation provider, then a corporate organisation will have some travel agent rates in there. They'll have their own rates, which they've negotiated directly with you.
Yes.
They will have rates from aggregators like your Booking.coms and your Expedias and all that kind of stuff. And that's up to the customer of what they want to turn on and turn off as far as what their inventory stream looks like. But the majority of it is being driven then by the GDS, or the Global Distribution System.
That's the system that the travel agents use.
So if I was to go into a travel agent on the street and I say, can you get me to London? They'll tick, tick, tick away, and then all of a sudden they're on the GDS and they're seeing all of the inventory.
Craig, how many flights have you booked in your career, just out of curiosity?
Let's not go there, but I do understand, I very much understand the process of it. Is that my forte? I don't think it's necessarily my forte.
So just so I understand, because I'm always thinking in view of our clients, right?
Yeah.
And I do want to unpack that, the profile of how people are booking, those corporate people who have to go and move me around the country.
Yeah.
which is easy because I'm so organised, but but understanding that, but always thinking about our potential clients, right? So if you're not on the GDS, right? If you're not that prolific with the systems and technology is a little overwhelming, or you're pretty busy already, how do you go about getting your property there? Because if 90% or 80 or 90% of it is booked through it, if you're not on it,
correct,
you're missing
the
everything but
opportunity.
10%.
Yeah.
Right?
So to get onto the GDS, particularly when I travel to regional areas, it's this big, the guys from Brisbane versus the regional centres.
Totally.
It's totally that. And I get that because they're small businesses, they're family-run businesses, and they need to look after their own, right?
Yep.
So if you put your inventory via some of the .coms in order to,
Yes.
to grow, it's no different. That it's still a technology medium where you distribute your content. So for someone to get onto the GDS, you look at your big organisations, they'll have their own agreements with the GDS, but there are third parties that allow you, that work with smaller organisations which do the work for you. I think one's called TravelClick as an example.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
So a small entity or a small provider who might have
Or a
10
one-man
rooms,
band.
one-man band,
one
they've got
business, even if it's a
15
good
rooms,
Small
20
motel.
rooms.
Yeah, exactly.
Correct. They can still put all of those rooms or a portion of those rooms via the GDS. So in order to, and what that does then, that enables the corporate customer to stay in that booking funnel. The corporate customer wants to stay in that online booking funnel as much as they possibly can, because what's happening when they're booking is they're taking then a cost centre, they're adding a cost centre to it, a requisition code, a purchase order number, and all of that information then flows through to the reconciliation. Because if you all of a sudden got a little bit being done over here, which is outside of the program online, and then so the finance team have to reconcile differently, your approver has to reconcile
So it
differently.
really boxes
Your
it
duty
up.
of
You're a
care
mining
has to-
company moving hundreds of thousands of people
Correct.
around all the time.
Yeah.
Then that's vital. You can't do
Correct.
that in-house. I mean, the manpower that takes that, and you don't have the specialty, right?
Yeah.
Well, to
So-
bring it to how some of our customers, because that's our niche at Resort Brokers, right?
Yeah.
We deal with people who are one-man operators to the larger hotels. That doesn't mean that one-person operator of the small motel in regional New South Wales can't access some of these bigger projects that are happening, because people need a variety, don't they,
Well,
Craig?
more than that, if you're not on it, you must be missing a trick, right?
There you go.
And I think our clients have just got their head around the .coms
Yeah.
and the cost of that, and understanding the benefit, and effectively a lot of it are using it in their mind. They've reconciliated it because it's marketing spend. But
So-
this is something I don't think a lot of people know about.
Yeah, so let's
right?
talk about the cost part, because there's always going to be a distribution cost when you're distributing your content, right?
Yep.
So if you're a big organisation and you want people to stay in this booking funnel,
Yes.
then a hotel adding in their GDS cost to their rate is actually okay.
Well, they do that already in a lot of places. The
Correct,
occupancy is good.
because
Yeah, right.
it's part of the distribution
Yes.
cost. So if your rate was 120, but you get the efficiency of an online portal, and your rate goes to 128 as an example to cover your distribution costs.
Yeah.
If you think about the organisation and the efficiencies that they will gain from not having a different process in finance, not having a different process for the
I
booker
know, I
on the
can
front end.
understand that
So you
from the
think
end
about
user.
the time that organisation will save is phenomenal.
The
So if they're paying-
reportability as well, right?
Yeah.
Because then that sort of flows into the economics of how an organisation's working as well, rather than, oh, geez, I've forgotten about that trip over there, or I've
Correct.
forgotten about the hire car over here, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Your partners, right? If we think, obviously we think of our partners as operators, really, which are your partners too.
Yeah.
But then if you think of your other partners effectively as the people who use you, what's the scale of businesses do you find? Like, do you find that actually we've got 30 agents across the country, we do quite a lot of travel,
Yeah.
we still always try and book direct. But
Yeah.
but do you find I imagine even I myself had a mindset till not that long ago that only big companies were doing that, right?
Yeah.
Only the big mining companies were doing that. And so to get in on this business, you need to be on it, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of regional towns are driven by that business, so you might know.
Correct.
But what's the scale of businesses that you find yourselves working with, and where do you think the tipping point is from a value point of view? Like, really?
Yeah, I think the value point of view, someone will get value from a travel management company over and above 300,000 or 400,000. right, in travel, right?
Yes.
Of travel spend.
Of
Yes.
overall travel spend,
Overall
not just
travel spend,
accommodation
yeah.
spend, right? So, and then obviously,
It's a lot of companies, really.
Yeah, that's right.
okay.
And a lot of companies, it doesn't take a
Yes.
huge amount to spend over 300,000 when you're starting to travel around the country, and you throw in a couple of overseas trips in there, and you get there quite quickly.
Yeah.
And then organisations up to 10 to 15 to 20 million. Now in Australia, there's a few of those, but the vast majority sit between, somewhere between 2 to 5 to 7 million in terms of travel turnover.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Yes,
but I think the
okay.
value of it, if I look at our organisation being CT Connections, then the value of a travel agent becomes not just this transactional arrangement that we have that I'm going to book your
No.
travel. When you go in, if you're a travel arranger,
Yes.
then what you will do is that you'll pull up our portal and you will see exactly who's travelling today, who's travelling tomorrow, who's travelling the next day.
Yes.
So you'll see that Trudy's travelling today. I know.
Like I'm going to Townsville and there's
Correct.
all this terrible weather, right?
Correct, that's right.
Yep.
But all of a sudden, then you can actually then go onto our platform and actually see on a map where everyone is. And I can see that you're departing today at 10 o'clock, and I can see where you are in the air,
Yeah,
and I
wow.
can see that you've been delayed. And if I'm a great EA, then what I'm going to do is that I know that you've got a really important meeting because you're interviewing Craig Southee for this podcast,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
And then but what I will do is I will actually then rearrange things while you were in the air because
Wow.
I can see where you are. Right, so if you look at the
Wow,
value
okay.
part rather than just the transactional
No,
part,
I agree.
is
I agree.
hugely
I
important.
agree.
And not a lot of people
But service, isn't it, really?
think about that. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, absolutely. It's a definition of service.
And it's the personal behind the interface.
Yeah.
So then something like a weather event, right? Obviously, in big countries where you would argue, we're not going to talk about flights and the cost of flights
Yeah.
and how challenging they are, but then what would you do? Like this week in Townsville, a lot of people would have been disrupted, saying that we've got some operators up there who are really full
Yeah.
because of it. How
Yep.
would you go about that if I was on my way up there or there?
Yeah, so what would happen, and this is what our teams have been
Yeah.
doing all week, we talked a lot, and I've spoken a lot about technology, but the actual people side of things is hugely important because
Yes.
the technology can do the easy stuff and we let the people do the hard stuff. So
Yeah.
what's been happening is our customers have been getting reports each day. Here are the people you've got in the location at the moment, and here are the people that you've got travelling to over the next
So
week.
if you're the head of, I don't know if they call it logistics for a huge mining company,
Yep.
and this situation, you actually get a list of everybody who's stuck there or whose week's going to be interfered with.
Yeah, yeah.
And you feed that to your customer
Correct.
or client, partner, as you call it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then they will decide, then they'll call me and say, Trudy, do you want to stay? If not,
Yeah.
these are the options, and you provide the options of where they could go and what they can do.
Correct. So
Wow.
again, from the hotelier's perspective, we're taking on a bit of that burden for them as well, because if they're in the location, they're worried about their own property, whether
The
I'm gonna have
operation,
That's the thing,
yeah, that's
stress is
right.
Am I
high.
going to have power? Am I going
Yep,
to have this? Am I going to
yep.
have that? Whereas the organisation then, or the company, is dealing back with the travel management company to then say, okay, I need these 5 people to stay. I'd like these 2 people to come out.
Yes.
And then we're then going back to and liaising, a lot of times over the telephone to the property in the region, and changing and reflecting those logistics based on what the company is
So
after.
the disaster side of it aside, the personal touch is still really there, but the technology's there to help streamline some of these operations so the customer service can rise to the top.
Correct, that's right. And then if you think about, again, it's the CT Connections, is that real, we see ourselves as a challenger brand in this space.
Yes.
Because you're the largest privately owned corporate travel company in
Correct.
Australia at the moment, right?
Correct, we
Yes.
are. And our view is this real and human challenger brand, because in service, not just in travel, but in service entities, you're starting to see that service element dissipate, right?
Totally.
So it's
Too much automisation to a
correct.
degree.
It's hugely important
Yeah.
for us to keep that, because at the end of the day, we don't own an aircraft, we don't own a hotel, nor do we own a car hire company. So what we've got to sell is we've got technology that we integrate with, but we've also got our people, and our people are our biggest asset to sell. So particularly in the environment where you have something happening in Townsville or Sweden overnight, etc., then these are the types of things where a travel management company can actually lift and be a catalyst for not only the supply base but for the customer particularly.
So when we're talking about a travel
amazing.
management company like CT Connections, right, and also a GDS, how does some of
Break down
our
a GDS.
clients...
You're a little tech savvy.
Sorry,
So break down a
global
GDS.
distribution system.
Right.
It's the way...
A loyalty program
Well,
or an online travel agent?
no. This is kind of the technology that sits behind
Beg your
travel
pardon?
agencies.
Beg your pardon, right.
And that's both tourism-based travel and corporate
Right,
travel.
yep.
Right, so you've got your GDS, you think as an accommodation provider, you're thinking about, well, how do I get onto the GDS? But more importantly, how do I become a preferred supplier through a travel management company like yourselves? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I'm going to give you three tips, right? And I want to focus on that phrase, how do I become a supplier of the travel management company? I think that's a myth that I'd like to dispel.
Okay.
Because
great.
you're not a supplier of ours.
Drop some truth.
You are a supplier of the corporate organisation who you want to stay at your property.
And that's nice. That's a much better way of looking at it.
Correct,
Because
that's
you're working
right.
It's a
together,
relationship.
right? You're not just there to
Correct,
It's a
because
mind
the travel
shift, I
management
agree.
company, a great travel management company like CT Connections, will look and say, well, your preferred network should be our preferred network, because if it's important for you to stay at Murrumbidgee Kettles Lodge in Thargomindah because that's the closest to your office, then that's okay. We'll book it for you. So it's not necessarily ours. But so how does someone get onto a list? There's a couple of ways. First and foremost, then I'd be taking the name of, if you are getting bookings direct, take the name of the company when you make that booking and start to look for trends. Right?
Okay.
The old-fashioned, once you start to see that there's a trend of ABC companies staying at your property, then try and use that relationship that you've built and start to then either say, how do you do your bookings? Or can I have a point of contact within your organisation because I'd like to give you a preferred rate. So then the old-fashioned cold call comes into play. But when we're starting to talk about some of the bigger organisations, what happens is that they will nearly almost use a platform called Lanyon. Lanyon, right? So Lanyon, and it's a third-party procurement tool of where a hotel or a motel will be able to set up their profile once within Lanyon. They'll set rates and they'll talk about, have I got a pool, have I got a restaurant, what am the size of my room, all those types of things. So you create your profile, and what that does then, it opens you up to the world. So when someone does a procurement activity in your location, then they will say, okay, then who can I go to? And it might be ABC Motel, XYZ Motel, because they'll be looking in Lanyon.
That would be their first stop for,
because to manage the procurement piece.
Yes, okay.
So that's a big one. Get your profile in Lanyon, and then all of a sudden, then when you want to go and bid for someone, then they will put their tender out via Lanyon. You will already be part of it.
Okay.
Yep. And
So
you will already be part of it.
So sort of it sits behind. It's the infrastructure that sits behind how the relationships are easily developed.
Correct. That's right. So when we procure, or whether the customer procures themselves, a lot of the times they will use Lanyon in order to launch their RFP. And they will ask a series of questions of which your profile will largely answer for you, and you will then put your rates in, and then you will be okay. And then they will go through a selection criteria and a negotiation process, and hopefully you get yourself on the list.
And so then tell me this. So then if I've just bought a property in Rockhampton and I'm a lovely, hardworking, friendly person, but I've got a lot of new things, technology's never really been my skill set. That's why I'm in a people business, right? And I'm not that good at maybe writing the salient points of my business, right? Is that where the personal relationship comes to? Like when you guys working with a big mining company who have come to you and said, we need to move this many people, is your first port of call to go to Lanyon? I mean, I know a lot of our operators say that they've been able to get some of the big corporate business, even though they maybe weren't the first choice because their service and their offering's great, right?
Or even just an overflow, you know?
Yeah, but no, actually getting it from some of the bigger ones because they've got a better property or friendlier or better food or whatever it might be.
Or better liked.
The above. Yeah, exactly. So how do you recommend they go about that?
So by following those steps, I think that you're going to get there. By delivering great service, what will happen is that people will talk about your property, and they will say to the organisation, and this has happened many times, look, you've negotiated with ABC, but these guys over here, I can park my truck there. I've got sufficient areas for my truck to be parked. They do a great breakfast for me. Sally's great at the front desk. She knows exactly what I'm after. So what happens is that they start to talk.
That's exactly what happens.
And then that filters back through the organisation. A corporate customer and a travel management company want you to stay, or want travellers to stay where they're comfortable, because what does that do?
They want happy staff.
It drives compliance.
Yep.
Right? If you can start to drive compliance through your preferred network, you
Yes.
can start to be better at negotiations.
Yes.
You can start to then improve your duty of care.
Yes.
And people are aligned to your program. And
The
you don't
whole
get that
relationship
leakage.
starts
The
to
whole relationship
spin up.
starts to change. Right?
Yeah.
And also
Right.
your staff are happier.
Correct.
Right, and if they're happier, then we all know obviously
Yeah.
what the knock-on of that is. It's
Yeah.
huge.
So say stay with it. If you're a small or medium entity, have a really good relationship with your TMC as well,
Yes.
because they're the ones who can support you within the customer as well. But also too, I would absolutely encourage for us to have a tripartisan relationship.
Yes.
The supplier should have a relationship with the corporate customer, and and the TMC should have a relationship with the corporate customer, and that relationship should be working in the best interest of all parties, not just one or the
like
other.
any good relationship. And I suppose big companies, even if all their team in a town want to stay at this place,
Yeah.
you know, the person who's booking it in Sydney or Melbourne,
Yeah.
you know, quite frankly, don't really. It's not their top of their priority when they're moving that many people that you like the eggs at this place over the other one, or the beds or whatever it
Yeah.
is, right? So
there's
I can imagine that.
technology. Well, you touched on it earlier, but the technology that supports these conversations and these relationships to grow, right? The water cooler conversation on everyone's lips, though, is AI, you know, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
How's that affecting your business, and how's that helping us to do these things in an easier way, if it is in fact doing so?
What will happen with AI, and I don't know when this is, whether it's, you know, but we're getting close to it. So what will happen is that as a traveller, and I travel a lot myself, then I want the system to start to understand me, right? So I always travel on a non-flexible fare in an airline. I always like to stay at these couple of hotels. I always kind of travel at these same dates, but yet I still have to go into this online booking tool and tell the system what I want.
Yes.
So AI will fix that. It will then start to feed me itineraries based on my past behaviour.
Wow,
And that's
right.
that machine learning piece.
Yeah, okay.
So if we go back to the importance of having content and your inventory into those platforms, this is hugely important, because it now looks at me as a traveller. And if we look and say, well, okay, Jack always stays here, and I want to grow my market share because he likes to stay there.
Yes.
If you've got a trend of staying there, what will start to happen is that the platforms will start to then just feed your itinerary to you, and
Wow.
rather than you having to select it. So that is actually really promising for regional providers
is.
who know that they're the best fit because they've got the space in the car park for the trucks and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, because it's going to then start to grow and push
So
that
that's
industry
already
through.
happening from a machine
Yeah.
learning
It is-
perspective, but
it
it's
is
going to
already
grow
happening.
when AI starts to really get those wheels are greased properly, right?
So you need to be, like, all our clients need to be online now. Really, even if they've got good occupancy and they can enjoy great direct bookings, so on, they actually need to, because of just
Yeah.
the change
Because it's not
of how
about
it's
them,
happening.
it's about their clients.
And the way that their clients
And the
wish
way
to
their
interact
clients
with
want to
them.
do
Yes.
business.
Correct, that's
Yeah.
right.
So it's not
So
about
they're
them.
driving
It's
it.
about that
Yeah.
secondary, you know, they've got to think about their business and
Yeah.
the way their clients are thinking.
And I suppose your interface and the actual software is really user friendly, right? I imagine that's something that's really important,
Oh, yeah.
because for everyone who wants to talk to someone, there's someone else who's prolific like you are, good at it, you know, online, and being able to do it. And
nice of you to
don't-
say.
well, yeah, but don't want to, you know?
Yeah.
And want a really easy system that can navigate.
Craig,
So-
you were involved in this, though.
Yeah.
You know, even in your past iterations, you've been part of, especially in the accommodation side, helping develop and personalise and professionalise some of these online booking tools to make it more user friendly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's right. And if you can see vision, so take yourself away from the corporate sector and what
Yes.
the travel company is doing,
Yes.
and how can AI affect even some of the smaller organisations.
Yep.
So will we get to a stage, and you know, let's say I've got a 20 or a 30 room hotel,
Yep.
right, or motel.
Yep.
Then through a tapping of the card and all that, and through how I purchase, we've got all of this information. A hotel or a motel has got so much information about a customer.
Yes.
Is how do you gather that together and make sense of it and get this hyper-personalisation happening, right? Because
Yeah.
for when I arrive, people know I like to go to the gym in the morning, and they like, if I go to the gym in the afternoon, then that's always good as well. But how cool would it be for someone to say that Craig's coming in, I've got all this information, I've seen him tap into the gym here, I've seen him tap into the restaurant over here, this is kind of the food that he eats, and a gym towel's in my room when I get there. or
amazing.
something's on the TV, or
Yes.
something's in the restaurant to say, hey, the chef's got this great duck salad. I think you'd really love it. So that's that hyper-personalisation.
Hyper-personalisation. That's an interesting word.
I think that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
I agree. I reckon
That's
any
the
little
cool stuff,
personal,
right?
that's the cool stuff.
Yeah.
You've even said it when
yeah.
you travel, Trudy, is like, something, you have to stay, and you do stay with our clients because they're the ones that are looking after you, but you enjoy staying with the ones that you've got a personalised relationship
But
with.
also the ones that also just to have a little bit of acknowledgement of where you've been, so they remember a bit what you do,
Yeah.
and where have you come from today, because they know how much I travel. But I think that's really cool, that stuff,
Yeah.
where the idea of like there's a protein ball, there's a bottle of wine in my room,
Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
protein
yeah.
ball in
Yeah.
yours,
Yeah.
but something that you can utilise. So then how does your software allow our clients, all of our clients, to gather that information, right?
Yeah, the software will take the inventory and display it to the customer and allow them to book, right?
Yep.
And then from the booking, then they will get a notification depending on how that is, but usually robotically or automatically to say that Trudy's made the booking, her check-in dates are here,
Yes.
and that becomes quite an efficient process. So we've got our store of information about, and our store of information might be how far in advance does someone book?
Have you seen that change?
So those
Apparently
types
that's
of
changed massively.
Yeah, there's
Yep.
certainly it has fluctuated a lot since COVID.
Yes.
But I would really, and I don't necessarily know a huge amount about the platforms and systems in the hotel industry, but I would encourage of how you can get all of this personal information that a hotel or a motel collects on
Yes.
a company
And share it.
and make something of it.
Make something
Yes.
or
Turn
develop
that
it, use it.
Turn that information and bring it into something that is of tangible benefit of
Yes.
how you can then increase that personalisation to your customer as and when they
Craig,
arrive at your hotel.
thank you so much for all that information.
We
I
can't
think
be
our
done yet. I've got
clients,
so many more questions.
Yeah.
I know, we
Yeah,
might
we
have to
are.
bring
It's
Craig
amazing.
back another time, but if some of our listeners who are accommodation providers, right, whether it's motels, hotels, caravan parks, short-term management rights operators, which operate a lot of service departments around the country,
Yeah.
if they wanted to ask you some more questions or one of your team some more questions, how do they get in touch with you?
Let's share my details.
We'll share your
in terms
details,
of LinkedIn
yep,
profiles.
downstairs,
You can
down
contact me via
underneath.
Yes.
LinkedIn. You can email me. You can call me directly. I don't mind. I love the industry, and I'm at a stage where I like to give back to the industry. And I think particularly small business. I've grown up in regional towns myself, and the older you get, the more you tend to morph back to your region. So
Isn't that true?
I'd love to help any regional suppliers out
I
improve
want
their
to
business.
get you back on shortly,
Okay.
because I would love us to talk about when you go back to your cricket World Cup experience.
yeah.
Right, we've got probably one of the biggest events that operators are going to see.
The Olympics
Right, and how do
coming
they
up.
maximise it? But more than that, also how do the corporates get in on it, get the good places to stay?
Yeah.
We need to talk about the Olympics. We need to get you back in and talk to you about
We
the
need
Olympics
to talk about
and how you're
how
seeing
the
trends.
accommodation industry can benefit from the Olympics, not just for those 2 or 4 weeks, but for the years around it. It's not just about the people travelling
Correct.
to the event, it's the whole industry. And, we didn't even really get to that
No,
today. It all
and
goes there
let's
very
get
quickly.
you back next time. So I actually think that's something that people can start actioning sooner rather than later. Also, all the infrastructure work.
Infrastructure
It's going to
work's
come into
coming
place
through.
if we build a stadium.
Well, there was. I remember my first day of university, and I was sitting next to some chap in our lecture hall.
Here we go.
And our lecturer was Neil Leeper, and our first ever topic at university was around the Olympics
Yes.
and the impact that has on tourism. So,
Is that right? Well, that's a nice way to round it
so
out.
I'm sure that you will have your textbook, so we can bring that textbook in.
It's
and we can
cool. I
talk about
remember
it.
that like it was yesterday. I'm sure I was at that lecture and not getting over last night's excavates.
That was so interesting. I genuinely feel like we've been talking for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I have so many more questions. We're going to get you back next time if you'd be so kind.
Love it.
Regional General Manager, CT Group, largest private corporate travel company in Australia, coming forward in leaps and bounds. And thank you for coming on board. It was a great conversation.
Lovely,
Yeah,
guys.
thank
Thanks
you.
for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Cheers. Thanks, mate.
Thank you so much for joining us on Checked In with Resort Brokers. If you enjoyed the insights from this episode, we'd love your support with a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
And don't forget to hit subscribe on your favourite platform and stay connected with us on social media @Resort Brokers.
We're excited to continue this amazing journey with you. See you on the next episode.